At our family brunch, my sister jingled the keys to Dad's estate like they were her new toy. Everyone clapped when he announced she'd earned his trust. But what no one knew, what they didn't get, was that I already owned the company that held everything under his name. That included the very house we were sitting in. A quiet fact that made the mimosa in my hand taste like victory. The table looked perfect. Sunlight streamed through those floor-to-ceiling windows, making rainbows on the linen, while mimosas fizzed and the air smelled like expensive perfume and fresh coffee. This was the Vale family, a curated performance of wealth and harmony. But while they were all playing their parts, I knew something they didn't. I was the one who really held the power here. I watched my father smile at Samantha as he handed her the reins to the family estate, the keys to the kingdom. And in that moment, I smiled too. But my smile wasn't for her. It was for me. My victory wasn't obvious to anyone. It didn't need to be. I already had everything they thought she was about to inherit. The family gathered around the long, polished table, each of us carefully placed in our assigned spots. There was my father, of course, at the head of the table, a man who had spent his life building an empire. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his tailored suit as impeccable as ever, exuding the air of a man who could command a room with just his presence. To his right, always in the spotlight, sat my younger sister, Samantha. She wore a dress so white and so flawless, I was certain it had cost more than my first car. Her hair, a perfect shade of honey blonde, framed her face like a halo, catching the light just right. She was the golden daughter, and everyone knew it. She had always been the one to make people laugh, to charm the room, and my father adored her for it. She was radiant today, playing the role to perfection. A mix of joy and self-assuredness shone in her eyes as she sat there, smiling that soft smile she had mastered for years, the one that melted hearts and made everyone around her feel special. Across the table, the rest of the family followed their usual routine. Uncles in navy blazers discussed stock prices like they were matters of life and death, while cousins my age exchanged knowing glances over brand new watches they had bought with their latest paychecks. And there I was, seated at the far end of the table, with the strange honor of sitting at the head of the family gathering, a seat that, in truth, felt more like exile. It placed me directly opposite my father, the man who had built everything we were celebrating today, and yet, in the same breath, made me feel like a stranger in my own family. The Vale family was a spectacle, a curated performance of wealth, beauty, and harmony. The fine china gleamed, the crystal glasses sparkled in the sunlight, and the air was filled with the sound of polite conversation, punctuated by the clinking of silverware. And in the midst of it all, I sat, quietly observing, already knowing the punchline to the performance that was unfolding. My father took a sip from his glass, a knowing smile curling at the corners of his lips. He looked down the table, his eyes settling on Samantha. Her smile widened at the attention. It was a look that, I now realized, she had always craved. The room fell into a comfortable silence, and I knew what was coming. I had known for weeks. This was the moment my father had been building toward, the moment he would pass the torch. I held my glass of mimosa delicately, swirling the pale orange liquid as if I were trying to stall the inevitable. The smooth fizz tickled my tongue, but it did nothing to dull the bitterness that had been quietly creeping in all morning. My father tapped his glass with the back of his spoon, sending a soft chime that rang through the room. The polite murmur of conversation died down instantly, all eyes now on him. "Thank you all for being here," my father began, his voice smooth and rich. As always, he knew how to command attention. "As you all know, family is the cornerstone of everything we've built here at Vale Properties. It's about legacy, about passing the torch to the next generation." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air, the silence thick with expectation. The spotlight shifted, and for a brief moment, his gaze landed on me. I didn't flinch, didn't react. I kept my expression neutral. The mask I had perfected over years of practice. My fingers tightened around the glass in my hand, the only indication of the tension inside me. Then, with a deliberate slowness, my father's eyes moved past me to Samantha. She was already leaning forward slightly, the picture of a dutiful daughter, her eyes filled with admiration and gratitude, her hand gently resting on the table. It was all so rehearsed, so perfectly timed. "I've watched my daughters grow," my father continued, his voice taking on a slightly softer tone. "And I've seen both of you work in your own ways, but only one of you has shown the vision, the intuition, the leadership required to take the reins." He paused again, and the table seemed to collectively hold its breath. All of them were waiting for the announcement that would change everything. It wasn't a surprise, it never was, but somehow, hearing it out loud made the whole thing feel final, like a door being slammed shut. "And I am proud to announce," he said, his voice steady and full of conviction, "that Samantha will be taking the reins of the Vale family estate. She has earned my trust and my faith, and I am confident that she will carry our legacy forward into the future." There was a beat of silence, and then the room erupted in applause. The clapping was loud, enthusiastic, almost overwhelming in its fervor. My Uncle Robert boomed his approval. "Brilliant choice. Arthur, brilliant." My Aunt Carol dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin, whispering something to the person next to her that sounded like, "Oh, she so deserved this. She's been working so hard." Samantha beamed, her smile widening as she rose slightly from her seat, just enough to acknowledge the applause. She lifted her glass in a small, graceful gesture of thanks, her eyes sparkling with a mix of humility and triumph. And just like that, the mantle had been passed. The crown had been placed on her head, and the family's attention shifted entirely to her. I didn't move. I didn't clap. I didn't smile. Instead, I raised my glass slowly, as if toasting the moment. The mimosa shimmered in the glass, but the taste in my mouth was nothing like the delicate fizz I had been sipping on. It was the taste of something far more satisfying, something they couldn't see, the truth, the quiet victory I held in the palm of my hand, while they were all busy celebrating an illusion. Samantha continued to bask in the adoration, the applause still ringing in her ears, the bright future she had always imagined stretching out before her like an open road. She had worked for this moment, played the part, charmed the right people, and now it was hers. But they didn't know, did they? They didn't know that I had already won. My victory wasn't in the applause, in the cheers, or in the accolades. It wasn't in the announcement of who would be the new leader of the family. No. My victory was in the quiet space between those moments. It was in the knowledge that while they celebrated her taking the reins, I had already secured them. I already controlled everything they thought they owned. My name was the one on the deed, not hers, not my father's, just mine. They didn't know that the empire they thought they were handing down had already been quietly taken. They didn't know that I was the one holding the keys to the kingdom. Samantha's crown was an illusion. My victory was real, and that, in the end, was the most satisfying part of all. As I sat there, sipping my mimosa, I couldn't help but feel a small, serene smile tug at the corners of my lips. No one at that table knew what I knew. They didn't see the game I had been playing. They didn't see the pieces I had moved in silence. But I did. And that was all that mattered. While they clapped for Samantha, I sat there, quietly content, watching the applause swell around me, knowing full well that none of them had any idea. None of them knew that the empire they thought they were handing to her was already mine. They couldn't see the invisible strings I had pulled, the careful, patient steps I had taken to secure everything they believed was theirs. Not a single person at that table understood what I had done, and that was what made it all so perfect. My father, for all his charm and power, had never understood me. He saw my silence as coldness, my focus as a lack of warmth. He had always favored Samantha, the golden child, the one who effortlessly glided through life with charm and beauty, the one who played the part he wanted her to play. But Samantha had never built anything. She had never worked for anything. And yet she was the one who was always celebrated, always given the spotlight. I wasn't bitter about it, not anymore. I had learned that the game was never about charm. It was about control. And I had spent the last few years quietly, deliberately, seizing control of everything they thought they owned. I had watched my father, watched his every move, his every decision, and learned from it. I had learned that the foundation of everything he built was not in people, not in loyalty or love, but in structure. Power was never in the smile, the charm, or the image. It was in the mechanics, the things that no one saw. And that's where I'd played my hand. I didn't need to be the one at the head of the table, the one receiving the applause. I didn't need to be the one whose name was on the deed, at least not visibly. I didn't need the family's recognition. What I needed, what I had always needed, was to be the one who controlled everything. So, while Samantha sat there, basking in the applause, the praise, the adoration, I held a quiet victory in my hands. They had no idea that the company, Vale Properties, the very estate they were celebrating, had already passed into my hands, not through some hostile takeover, not through some flashy, dramatic corporate maneuver. No, I had acquired it with nothing more than silence, patience, and a trust that no one knew existed. It had been months, even years, in the making, but now, with a single signature, with a final, quiet transfer of assets, everything they thought was theirs was mine. And none of them knew. My father didn't know. Samantha didn't know. The rest of the family didn't know. They believed I had walked away from it all, that I had given up. They believed that my decision to leave Vale Properties, to take a sabbatical, was a sign of failure to them. It was a retreat, a moment of weakness. But what they didn't know was that it was all part of the plan. I had stepped away from the spotlight, stepped away from the family business to build something far more powerful. While they believed I was lost, I was building an empire in secret. I had started Vale Urban Trust, LLC, a shell company, completely anonymous, no history, no face. It was the perfect cover. No one would have ever suspected that it was mine. My father would have dismissed it, thinking it was just another faceless investment firm. But I had designed it with a single purpose in mind: to acquire Vale Properties piece by piece. I knew the company inside and out. I knew where the weaknesses were, where the cracks lay. I knew which properties were undervalued, which assets were over-leveraged, and which tenants were on the verge of default. And I knew exactly how to take advantage of all of it. Over the months, I watched as the company's fortunes shifted. I watched my father pour money into flashy projects, into high-risk developments that had no real return. I watched as he ignored the smaller, more stable properties, the ones that actually generated the income the company relied on. He focused on the shiny, the glamorous, the things that looked good on paper. Meanwhile, I was quietly acquiring those smaller, undervalued assets, the ones that no one else saw the value in, the logistics warehouses, the office parks, the retail centers. These were the backbone of the company, the parts that actually generated the cash flow. And I knew that they were the key to taking everything else. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. I let the market do the work for me. As the economy began to shift, as interest rates rose and the market began to cool, the cracks in my father's empire grew wider. The properties that had once seemed like surefire investments began to flounder. Tenants started to downsize. The luxury condos, the the flagship properties that my father was so proud of started to lose value. And in that moment, I made my move. It was quiet, almost invisible. I began acquiring the distressed assets, the ones that were underperforming, the ones that no one else saw the potential in. I did it piece by piece, property by property, building up an empire behind the scenes. All of it was legal, all of it was above board, but no one knew it was. I used proxies, corporate lawyers, firewalls. I hid behind layers of legal protection so that my name would never appear on any of the documents. I was a ghost in the system. I watched as my father, my sister, and the rest of the family believed that the business was still in their hands. They believed that everything was unfolding according to my father's plan. But all the while, I was taking everything, and no one knew. They didn't see the slow, quiet dismantling of the company's foundation. They didn't see the way I was methodically acquiring each part of the business. They didn't know that I had already taken control of the majority of the family estate. Samantha didn't know. My father didn't know. They sat there, clapping for her, thinking she was the one who had earned their approval, thinking she was the one who would carry the family legacy. But the truth was, they were all just pawns in a game they didn't even know was being played. The mimosa in my hand tasted like victory because I knew that while they were busy celebrating her, I had already won. Samantha was the golden child, the one everyone thought would take over, the one everyone adored. But she had never worked for anything. She had never built anything. All she had done was smile and play her part. She had been handed everything, and now, while she sat there, basking in the glory of her father's approval, I was the one who had secured the future. I was the one who had taken the reins of the family business. They didn't understand what had happened, and they never would. They didn't understand that while they were all applauding Samantha's success, I had already acquired everything they thought was theirs. They had no idea that the company, the estate, the very empire they had worked so hard to build was already in my hands. It was perfect. It was quiet. It was the victory I had been waiting for, the one they would never see coming. My father thought he was passing the torch to Samantha, but what he didn't know was that I had already stolen the flame. And while they sat there, smiling and clapping for her, I was the one who truly controlled the future. The game had already been won. They just didn't know it yet. It didn't matter how much they celebrated Samantha's victory. The truth was, she had already lost. I had already taken everything, and in that moment, as I sat there, quietly sipping my mimosa, I couldn't help but smile. I had won. The family thought they were witnessing the passing of the torch, but in reality, they were witnessing the fall of the empire. I was the one who had taken control, and they would never know it. Not until it was too late. As the applause died down, Samantha rose to her feet, the golden girl once again taking her place in the family's center stage. The sunlight caught her dress, making her look almost angelic, as if the universe itself had conspired to place her exactly where she needed to be. There was no hesitation in her movements, no awkwardness in her smile. She was everything they had expected her to be, everything they wanted her to be. She was the embodiment of their legacy, the face they had always chosen to represent the family. She could do no wrong. My father beamed at her, his pride shining through his gaze, his chest puffed out with what I knew was an overwhelming sense of accomplishment, as if the very act of declaring her the new head of the family estate was the pinnacle of his life's work. I could practically see him patting himself on the back, congratulating himself for having done the right thing. His hand rested warmly on her shoulder as he gave her a small nod, the same nod he had given her after every accolade, every performance. She too basked in it. She loved it. It was her moment. and she knew how to savor it. Her smile widened, a mix of humility and triumph that didn't fool me for a second. She was not just playing the part, she was thriving in it. The air around her seemed to sparkle as she began speaking, her voice smooth and confident. "Thank you all," she said, her words soft yet carrying the weight of someone who had just been entrusted with the world. "I can't express how much this means to me, I promise. I'll carry this family legacy forward with honor." Her words were carefully chosen, as they always were. Every sentence was crafted to sound genuine, to appear humble, but underneath it all, there was that glint in her eyes, the one that screamed victory. She was the center of attention, and she was loving every second of it. "We're going to make big changes," she continued, her voice rising slightly, drawing in the family's full attention. "The future of this estate will be something no one can ignore. I've already started planning for renovations to the main house. We'll host charity galas, make it a venue for important events, a symbol of our family's commitment to both tradition and progress." She paused for effect, letting her words sink in, and I could almost hear the collective nods around the table, the approval in their eyes. Samantha's vision for the future was as bright and polished as the family's wealth. She spoke of grand plans, of revitalizing the estate, of making it not just a symbol of the past, but a beacon for the future. But there was something about it, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. She was so sure of herself, so confident, that it almost made me feel like an outsider, like I didn't belong in the picture she had so carefully painted. I could feel her eyes scanning the room, looking for validation. And when she found it, when the family leaned in, hung on every word, I saw the satisfaction in her smile. It was like watching a conductor lead an orchestra, knowing every note, every beat was exactly where it needed to be. And then, as if by design, her gaze found me. I felt her eyes on me before I saw her. She was waiting for my reaction, expecting me to show something, anything, a sign of disappointment, perhaps a flicker of envy. She wanted to see a crack in the mask I had been perfecting for years. But I didn't give her one. I didn't flinch, didn't twitch. I didn't let her see that underneath it all. I was smiling, not because of her plans or her grandiose speech, but because I already knew what they didn't. I already knew that everything she was talking about, the renovations, the galas, the legacy, was a house of cards, and I had the wind in my favor. As Samantha's plans filled the air with empty promises of a brighter future, I felt my phone buzz silently under the table. I didn't look at it immediately. I didn't need to. I already knew what it was. A message I had been waiting for. A message that would confirm what I had worked so hard to achieve. It was the final piece. The legal transfer of the estate. The final confirmation that everything my family thought they still owned was now officially under my control. But I didn't look at the message right away. No. I stayed present, stayed in the moment, and let Samantha continue her performance. I knew she was expecting some kind of reaction from me, some sign that I was upset, that I felt robbed of something. But she was wrong. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that while she was talking about expanding the estate and carrying on the family name, I had already taken it all. The estate, the company, the very name they all revered. I was the one holding it. I was the one who had quietly maneuvered in the shadows to ensure that when the time came, I would be the one in control. It wasn't just the family estate that was mine. It was everything they had built. But I didn't need to flaunt it. I didn't need to show it. I didn't need to let anyone know that my victory had already been won. So, as Samantha spoke, I remained calm, steady, my face a mask of perfect composure. I kept my gaze locked on her, a serene smile playing at the corners of my lips. She was performing for the family, and I was content to let her. She didn't know that the stage she stood on was mine. The applause died down as she concluded her speech, and the family leaned in to congratulate her. My father, ever the proud patriarch, raised his glass in her direction, his eyes glowing with approval. Samantha beamed back at him, the light of his approval making her glow even brighter. It was a sight to behold. They were so caught up in the idea of her success, in the story they had been telling themselves for years, that they couldn't see the truth standing right in front of them. She had been handed everything. She had never earned it. She had simply played the part she was told to play. But I wasn't here to take anything from her. I wasn't here to break her. I didn't need to. I was content in my quiet, invisible victory. Just as Samantha basked in the glow of her moment, I let my phone vibrate under the table. I glanced down, just enough to catch the words on the screen. Escrow release confirmed. Final transfer of assets complete. Vail Properties and all subsidiary properties are now under the full legal ownership of Vail Urban Trust, LLC. The words were simple, matter of fact, but to me, they were everything. In that moment, everything Samantha had been celebrating: the estate, the power, the legacy was no longer hers. It was mine, and no one knew it yet. I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as I raised my glass, the mimosa sparkling in the light. I caught Samantha's eye, and for the briefest moment, she looked at me, that glint of expectation still there, still hoping to catch me off guard. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I didn't let her see the glee, the quiet joy I was feeling. Instead, I raised my glass to her, just as the rest of the family had, and I smiled. "Congratulations, Samantha," I said, my voice calm, controlled, without a hint of bitterness. The words came out smoothly, with just enough warmth to make it sound genuine, but not so much that they would suspect anything. Samantha's eyes flickered, her smile faltering ever so slightly, as if she sensed something was different, but she didn't question it. She just smiled back. That radiant smile of hers, the one that had always disarmed everyone. And as she turned back to the family, talking about her plans for the estate, I couldn't help but feel a small, private satisfaction. She thought she had won. She thought she was in control. But I had already won. The estate, the family legacy, the very future she thought she was shaping, it was all mine. I had played the long game. And now the pieces were falling into place. Samantha could continue her performance for as long as she liked. I didn't need the spotlight. I didn't need the applause. I had something far more powerful. I had control. And while they all celebrated her, I sat back, savoring the quiet victory I held in my hands. Growing up in the Vail family was never simple, but if you asked anyone, it would seem so. My father was a man driven by purpose, by results, by the big picture. To him, everything had a place, a structure. And I was always a little bit outside that structure. Samantha was his shining star, the daughter who fit perfectly into the mold of who he wanted her to be. She was the one who knew exactly what to say, exactly how to act, exactly how to charm. She could turn the most mundane conversation into something magical, something that made everyone around her feel important, feel seen, and she loved it. She loved being the center of attention, loved basking in the warmth of approval, of admiration. She thrived in the spotlight, and my father loved that about her. He was proud of her for it. In a way, she was everything he had ever wanted: effortless, poised, charming, perfect. She had always known how to get what she wanted, and more importantly, how to make everyone around her believe she deserved it. She didn't have to work for it. She didn't have to try. All she had to do was be herself, and somehow that was enough. But I wasn't like that. I never was. From a young age, I was always the serious one, the one who spent hours reading, studying, focusing on the things that mattered to me. I didn't care for the social games my father played with people. I didn't want to charm anyone or make them laugh. I wasn't interested in pleasing people, at least not in the way Samantha did. I wasn't interested in being seen. I was interested in understanding, in mastering the complexities of the world. I was driven by a different kind of ambition. I wanted something real, something tangible. I wasn't looking for approval. I was looking for results. Samantha, of course, didn't understand that, and neither did my father. He saw me as rigid, as cold, as someone who couldn't connect, someone who couldn't read a room, who couldn't play the part he needed me to play. He sent me to the best schools, not because he thought I could thrive there, but because he thought it might polish my rough edges. He thought it might give me the charm I lacked, the personality I didn't have, but it didn't. I went to Wharton, and I earned my MBA with honors. Not because I wanted to impress him or anyone else, but because it was what I wanted. I loved the challenge. I loved the structure of finance, the world of numbers and strategy. It was where I thrived, where I could build something out of nothing. It was where I could see the world as it was, not as people wanted to see it. And while my father was busy investing in Samantha's Instagram and lifestyle brand, I was working my ass off in boardrooms, in financial analyses, in planning and executing deals. I built the foundation of our family business from the ground up, and no one ever seemed to notice. No one ever seemed to care. Samantha, on the other hand, was given everything. My father built her career around her image, around her ability to make people feel something. She was a vice president of brand synergy, which, in my father's mind, was the most important role at Vail Properties. She was the face of the company, the one who spoke to the media, the one who brought in the deals. She didn't need to know about the intricacies of our holdings, the business models, or the financials. All she needed to do was be seen. She was the public face of Vail Properties, and my father adored her for it. He loved the attention she brought. He loved how effortlessly she made connections, how people gravitated to her. He loved the fact that she was so adored by everyone around her, but it was all so shallow, it was all a performance, and I had no interest in that kind of life. I wasn't interested in being loved. I was interested in being respected. I was interested in results. So, when the time came for me to prove myself, I did it in the only way I knew how. I took on the hardest project at Vail Properties, a distressed commercial lot in Denver that no one else wanted. It was a mess, zoning disputes, budget overruns, and a project that was considered career suicide. But I didn't care. I saw it as an opportunity, a challenge. I threw myself into it, working day and night, negotiating with unions, battling city council, restructuring financing, and overseeing the architectural redesign. I turned that project into something incredible. I built the Pinnacle at Union Station, a 40-story tower that became the crown jewel of the Denver skyline, and it was a financial success, generating a 17% ROI in its first year. And when I presented it to my father, I didn't expect any grand recognition. I didn't expect him to bow down and praise me. All I wanted was for him to see the work I had done. I wanted him to see that I had earned my place. But that wasn't what happened. When my father looked at the final report, he didn't see the success. He didn't see the hard work, the countless hours I had put in. He saw a building, but not the person who had built it. He saw the picture of Samantha at the gala, standing beside the mayor, and he said, "Samantha did a wonderful job with the press on this. I know she has a real gift for connecting with people, a true asset." That was all he said. He didn't even look at the rest of the report. The rest of it, my work, my achievement, was irrelevant to him. He didn't care about it. And that was when I realized that nothing I did would ever be enough for him. No matter how much I accomplished, no matter how much I built, I would always be the second choice. I would always be the one who was too rigid, too cold, too focused on results to play the game. My father didn't care about results. He cared about the story. and the story he wanted was about Samantha, that was when I decided to step back. I left Vale Properties, not because I wanted to find myself, as they all thought, but because I needed to get out. I needed to regroup. I needed to make a plan to figure out how to take control. And I did. I spent the next few years quietly, methodically, building something that would give me the control I had always wanted. I formed Vale Urban Trust, LLC, a shell company, and I began quietly acquiring the properties my father had overlooked, the ones that no one else thought were valuable. I started with the logistics warehouses, the office parks, the retail centers, assets that were undervalued, underappreciated, but essential to the family business's bottom line. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. The market was shifting, and I knew that with a little patience, I could acquire these properties at a fraction of their true value. And so I did property by property, deal by deal. I began to build an empire in the shadows. And the more I acquired, the more I realized that I didn't need Samantha's charm or my father's approval. I didn't need anyone's recognition. All I needed was control. And that's exactly what I was getting. Meanwhile, Samantha remained in her world of charm and image. She continued to build her brand, to make the connections my father thought were so important now. She was doing what she had always done, smiling, shaking hands, and playing the role she had been given. But I knew that she was just a puppet, and the strings were mine. I didn't need to be in the spotlight. I didn't need to be the one handing out awards or throwing galas. I just needed to own the game. I needed to own everything. And so, as Samantha continued to bask in the adoration of our family, as she talked about her grand plans for the future, I quietly watched, knowing that everything she spoke of the estate, the legacy, the family business, was already mine. It was a slow game, but it was the only one that mattered. And when the time came, when the pieces had all fallen into place, I would take what was mine. I would take control. Because in the end, it wasn't about charm or popularity. It was about power. And I was going to take it all. The decision to leave Vale Properties wasn't one I made lightly. At first, the idea was simply to take a step back, regroup, and reassess. I had spent years working tirelessly within the company, pouring every ounce of my energy into building something that my father, the one who had built this entire empire, could never truly see or appreciate. The result was a familiar feeling, a quiet, constant frustration that nothing I did was ever enough. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't charming, and I certainly wasn't the one who could win the room over with a smile or a clever quip. But I had built something that had value, something that was crucial to the very future of our family's fortune. And yet, none of it ever seemed to matter. So I left, not to wander in search of some elusive sense of self, as they all thought. I wasn't trying to find balance or become some sort of spiritual guru. No, I left because I had a plan. I left because I needed to create something that would allow me to take control, to finally have the power and respect I had always deserved. That plan was Vale Urban Trust, LLC. The name was unremarkable, intentionally so. It blended into the background of a dozen other investment firms, all of them faceless, all of them anonymous. But to me, it was the foundation of everything. It was my first step, the first piece in the game I was about to play. I needed to create something no one could trace back to me. If I was going to take control of the family estate, I had to do it quietly, legally, and without anyone noticing. The last thing I wanted was for my father to know what I was doing. He would never understand. He would never see it as anything other than betrayal. Even though I knew he had been the one who had pushed me into this position in the first place. No, I couldn't confront him directly. I couldn't challenge him in any way. Instead, I would do what he had always done, play the long game. The first step was to create the shell company, a structure that would allow me to acquire the assets I needed without ever raising suspicion. I enlisted the help of the best corporate lawyers money could buy. I needed experts in corporate law, people who knew how to work within the legal system and remain invisible at the same time. They were the architects of my plan, the ones who set up layers of legal protections, firewalls, and proxy companies to ensure that no one would ever trace any of this back to me. We formed Vale Urban Trust, a company with no face, no history, and no name that anyone would recognize. It was a perfect cover. The next step was to identify the assets I needed to acquire. I didn't want the flashiest properties or the ones that were already at the center of attention. No, I wanted the ones that were being overlooked, the properties that my father and Samantha had neglected in favor of the bigger, more glamorous developments. These were the properties that had real value, but they didn't shine. They didn't grab anyone's attention, but they were crucial to the long-term stability of the company. I knew every inch of Vale properties. I knew where the weak spots were. I knew which properties were undervalued, which ones were facing financial difficulties, and which ones were hidden gems. The logistics warehouses, the office parks, the aging retail centers. These were the ones I targeted. The next part of my strategy was simple, but it required patience. I couldn't acquire everything all at once. That would have been too obvious. No, I needed to do it slowly, methodically, one piece at a time. I started buying up these undervalued assets in secret. I used my anonymous trust to submit bids for properties that no one else cared about. They were all distressed, underperforming, but they had potential. I knew exactly how to make them work. The key was in the financing. These properties weren't expensive on their own, but they were attached to a larger portfolio, a portfolio that had significant debt, significant risk. The trick was to acquire them in a way that minimized my own risk. I didn't want to be saddled with any liabilities that could come back to haunt me. So, I worked with a team of forensic accountants and lawyers who helped me structure the deals in a way that shielded me from the company's existing debt. We would acquire the properties, but keep the liabilities separate, using a series of nested corporations and trust agreements to keep everything legal and above board. It was a delicate dance, but one that I was well equipped to handle. Meanwhile, my father and Samantha remained blissfully unaware. They continued to focus on the shiny new developments, the luxury condos, the grand projects that made headlines. They were so caught up in the idea of expanding the family's legacy, of continuing to grow the brand, that they never thought to check on the quiet, unglamorous parts of the business. That was their mistake. As the months went on, I quietly accumulated more and more of the company's assets. My trust was growing, and my control was becoming more and more absolute. But it still wasn't enough. I had to be careful, strategic. I couldn't let my father or anyone else catch on. So I kept a low profile, stayed out of the family's way, and let the assets accumulate in the background. By the time they started to notice, it would be too late. But I knew I needed one final piece to complete the puzzle, the family estate. The estate was the crown jewel, the symbol of everything my father had built. It was the last thing he held on to with any real pride. But I knew it was also his biggest vulnerability. The estate was a massive aging property, one that required significant investment to maintain. It had the potential to generate substantial income, but it was buried under layers of debt, and my father's team had failed to properly manage it. The estate was being held together by strings, and I was ready to pull those strings apart. But acquiring the estate wasn't going to be easy. It was tied up in a web of family trusts, legal agreements, and joint ventures. It wasn't just a matter of buying it outright. I needed to find a way to acquire the controlling interest in the estate without anyone suspecting what I was doing. This is where the trust structure became invaluable. Using the same legal maneuvers I had used for the other properties, I quietly negotiated with the banks, the investors, and the other stakeholders in the estate. I worked with my lawyers to create a new set of agreements, ones that would allow me to assume control of the property without anyone ever realizing what was happening. The estate wasn't just a piece of real estate, it was a symbol of everything my father had built. And once I controlled it, I controlled the family's legacy. The final step was a carefully timed series of transactions that would shift the ownership of the estate into my hands. I had to make it look like a regular business deal, one that made sense from a financial perspective. But behind the scenes, I was positioning myself as the sole beneficiary of the estate. It took months, but I pulled it off. By the time my father and Samantha realized what had happened, it was too late. I had already taken control. The estate, the company, the legacy, it was all mine. The beauty of it was that no one would ever be able to prove it. Everything was structured perfectly, legally, above board. I had taken control without firing a single shot, without even drawing attention to myself. I had played the long game, and I had won. And now, as I watched Samantha continue to bask in the spotlight, I couldn't help but smile. She thought she was the one in control. She thought she was the one carrying the family legacy forward. But the truth was, she was simply a pawn in a game I had already won. My father, too, would never see it coming. He would never understand what had happened until it was too late. And that, in the end, was the ultimate satisfaction. I had played the game in silence, in the shadows. And now everything they thought was theirs was mine. I had taken control of the family business. I had taken control of the estate. I had taken control of everything. And no one would ever know it was me until I was ready to show them. Samantha's excitement was palpable as she walked into the room, a smile wide on her face, her every step confident, sure, as if she were walking to claim a victory she'd been waiting for her whole life. To her, it was the next big step in her rise to power, another deal that would further cement her as the future of the family. She had no idea that the deal she was about to sign would be the final piece in a chain of events that would lead to her financial collapse. I watched from the corner of the room, carefully observing her movements, her excitement. To anyone else, this might have looked like any other business deal, another strategic move for the family. But to me, it was the culmination of years of silent planning. She had no clue that the paper she was about to sign was tied to a company that I, and only I, controlled. The details were meticulously arranged, hidden in layers of legal jargon and financial terms she didn't care to dissect. It wasn't about understanding the fine print for her. No, it was about the promise of success, about the glow of approval from our father, about the image of power she could display to the world. Samantha's mind was focused on the big picture, the future. My father, seated at the head of the table, was smiling at her, the approval in his eyes obvious. He didn't see the trap I had set. He didn't see that the trust and control he thought he was handing to his daughter was already gone, that it had slipped through his fingers without a single sign of resistance. As Samantha's lawyer handed her the deal, I could feel the tension in the room, the anticipation. This was her moment. She took the folder, held it up in the air for a moment, as if she were displaying a trophy she had just won. My father beamed at her, nodding with that look of proud satisfaction I had always loathed. The same look he had given her every time she succeeded. "This is it, Samantha," he said. "This deal is going to redefine the family's future. It's the vision I've always believed in." Samantha's smile grew even wider, her eyes bright with excitement. She glanced at him, almost as if seeking validation, and I saw the way she soaked it up. as if the entire world was waiting for this moment, this deal, this triumph. It was so effortless for her, so natural. And that's when it hit me. This was exactly how I had planned it. My father was so lost in the idea of legacy, in his dream of passing everything down to her, that he never even thought to question it. He never once considered that the very company his daughter was about to partner with was the one I had secretly gained control over. Samantha didn't know it yet, but the agreement she was about to sign would bind her to me in a way she couldn't even begin to comprehend. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Samantha took the pen, her fingers poised above the paper. She glanced over the terms for just a moment, but it was all so standard, so routine. The numbers, the language, it didn't matter to her. She wasn't interested in the details. She trusted the process, trusted that her instincts and her image were enough to carry her forward. She wasn't looking for the fine print, not when she was on the verge of what she saw as her greatest achievement. With a flourish, she signed her name at the bottom of the page. It was done. The deal was sealed. But what she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that in signing that document, she had unknowingly agreed to terms that would lead to her downfall. She thought she was taking control. She thought she was securing her place in the family's future, but in reality, she had just sold her future to a company that no longer belonged to her. A company that had been quietly taken over by the very person she had overlooked for so long, me. As Samantha sat back, satisfied with herself, my father turned to her, his pride evident in the way his chest puffed with approval. "Well done, my dear Saso. This is just the beginning. The family is counting on you. We're all counting on you." Samantha looked at him, her eyes glowing with gratitude, a silent acknowledgement that everything was falling into place. It was a picture-perfect moment, father and daughter, united in their vision for the future, but what they didn't know was that I had already won. I had already taken everything that they thought they still controlled. As they basked in the glow of the deal, I couldn't help but watch in silence. I watched Samantha's confidence grow, watched her belief in her own power deepen, but all the while, I knew that her victory was nothing more than an illusion. The deal she had signed was a brilliant stroke of irony. She thought she was expanding the family empire, securing it for herself, for her future. But she had been played. She had just mortgaged her entire future to me, to a company I controlled, to an empire I was slowly, methodically taking from under her feet. The beauty of it was that she would never see it coming. The deal was legally sound, and from her perspective, everything was moving forward according to plan. But I knew the truth. I knew that, within months, she would face the crushing weight of the financial strain she had just set in motion. The loan agreement she had signed was just the beginning. The terms were carefully crafted to ensure that her first quarterly report would trigger the default clauses, would expose her to a level of debt she could never manage. And once that happened, once the default was triggered, I would be there, quietly taking everything she thought she had worked for. I suppressed the smile that wanted to creep onto my face. It wasn't time for that yet. No, I had to remain calm, composed, just like I had always been. I had to let her enjoy this moment, let her believe she had everything under control. But the truth was, the moment she signed that agreement, her fate had already been sealed. As my father continued to praise her, as the family gathered around her, congratulating her on the deal, I sat back, feeling a quiet satisfaction. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to point out the flaws in her plan. I didn't need to remind her that she had just made a deal with the very company that I had built in silence. She would find out soon enough. She would see the cracks in her carefully constructed empire, and by then, it would be too late. And as I watched her revel in the approval of our father and the rest of the family, I couldn't help but feel a sense of irony. She had just signed away everything, but she didn't know it yet. She thought she was securing her legacy. She thought she was claiming her place in the family history. But she was wrong. The legacy was mine. The future was mine. And all she had done was hand it to me, unknowingly. With a single stroke of her pen, it was inevitable. I suppose there was no way this could have gone on forever. Eventually, the mask Samantha had been wearing would crack, and she would see the truth, the one I had known all along. I had played my part, stayed in the shadows, watched the show unfold while she danced in the spotlight. But the time for silence had come to an end. Samantha didn't know it yet, but the empire she thought she was inheriting was already crumbling. All the deals, all the plans she had made were based on a foundation that no longer existed. The truth was buried under layers of legal documents and quiet corporate maneuvering, and now it was all coming to a head. It happened one afternoon, a few days after the deal she had signed, the one that unknowingly tied her to me. I could see it in her eyes when she walked into my office. There was no grand entrance, no carefully composed facade. No. This time, she was raw, her hair disheveled, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had finally figured it out. She had finally realized that the game I'd been playing wasn't about her or our father or the legacy they had been so busy creating. It had always been about control, and I was the one who had it. "Lauren," she said, her voice trembling, the words barely making it past her lips. "I don't understand. What is this?" She held out a document in her hands, a loan agreement, the one she had signed with such confidence only weeks ago. Her eyes flickered to the name at the top, the name that had become an unspoken shadow in our family's history. Vale Urban Trust, LLC, she whispered. And in that moment, I knew she finally understood. She finally saw that everything she had worked for, everything she thought she had achieved, was nothing but a facade, a performance. I didn't speak at first. I let her words hang in the air. I watched as she struggled to make sense of it, as her mind worked through the pieces of the puzzle she had been too blind to see. Her breathing grew shallow, her fingers tightening around the document as if she could will the words to change, but nothing could change it now. She had already made the deal, already signed away everything. The look on her face, the dawning horror in her eyes, it was exactly what I'd been waiting for. It was the realization that her world was nothing but a house of cards, and I was the one who had knocked it down. She took a step closer, as if she thought somehow proximity could help her understand. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice cracking. "What did you do to us?" There was pain in her voice, but there was something else too. Resentment, betrayal. She wasn't just confused. She was angry. She was angry at me for what I had done, for taking everything from her, from our father, from our family. And in that moment, I understood her completely. She wasn't just angry at me for taking control of the family business, for taking everything she thought she deserved. She was angry because deep down she realized that I had done everything she had ever tried to do, only I had done it without anyone noticing. She couldn't comprehend that I didn't want what she wanted. She couldn't see that I had never cared for the legacy, the fame, or the praise. I didn't want to be adored like she was. I wanted power, control, something far more enduring. And that, more than anything, was what had driven her to this point. The realization that her role in the family had always been that of the pretty, charming daughter, the one who could win approval with a smile, the one who could move through life without ever truly being tested, had been exposed for the lie it was. I rose from my desk, slowly, deliberately, as if the weight of her words didn't affect me, as if I were perfectly calm. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the way her hands shook as she held the paper in front of me. You betrayed us. she said, her voice hoarse now, filled with emotion she could no longer contain. You took everything from me, from all of us. It was almost laughable, the way she thought she had a claim to any of this. The way she believed that by simply being the right daughter, the one who could charm everyone, she deserved everything that had been handed to her. No, Samantha, I said, my voice low and controlled. I didn't take anything from you. You gave it to me. She blinked, confusion still clouding her face, but I saw the flicker of realization in her eyes. She finally understood. She had given it all to me. She had signed away everything without even realizing what she was doing. And now the consequences were crashing down on her. The empire she thought she was building was already gone. It had never been hers to control in the first place. You think I wanted the same things you wanted, I continued, my voice steady, not a hint of emotion in it. You think I wanted the same approval, the same applause. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the truth I was giving her, but I wasn't finished. No, Samantha, I said, my eyes meeting hers with an intensity I knew she could never match. I wanted control, and now it's mine. She staggered back as if my words had physically struck her. Her eyes searched mine, desperate for some sign of mercy, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, just the cold, hard certainty of knowing that I had outplayed her at every turn. The realization of my victory was too much for her to process in that moment. I could see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed world, the walls she had built around herself starting to crumble. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling with raw emotion now. I didn't know it was you. She had never understood, not truly. She had never understood the quiet game I had been playing, the strategy I had so carefully laid out over the years. She had never known that everything she had ever achieved was a performance, a distraction. But now she knew. You never knew, Samantha, I said, my voice a calm, cutting tone. You never knew what it meant to build something. You only knew how to take it, then, and now you've taken something that wasn't yours to begin with. She fell silent, her body shaking, the tears she had been holding back finally spilling over. But there was no sympathy in me, no understanding. She had chosen her path, and now she had to live with the consequences. My father had always been blind to what really mattered. He had always chosen to focus on the things that were easy to see, the flashy, the glamorous, the charming. But what he didn't understand, what neither of them understood, was that the real power lay in control. I didn't need to be loved. I didn't need to be adored. I didn't even need to be understood. All I needed was the power to decide my own fate. And now, I had it. You think this is my fault, I said, my voice still calm, still steady. This is your fault, Samantha. You chose the easy path. You chose to play the part. You chose to trust people who only ever cared about the image. Her sobs were the only sound in the room now, the only evidence of the battle she had lost. And I stood there, cold, emotionless, watching her crumble. The empire you thought you had, the one you thought you were building, I continued, my voice softening only slightly. It was never yours. It was never for you. It was always mine. I built it, piece by piece, and now it's mine. She fell to her knees, her face buried in her hands as she cried, the weight of the truth finally crushing her. I didn't move, didn't offer a word of comfort. There was nothing to say. The game was over. I had won. And Samantha, my sister, the one who had always been the golden daughter, was nothing more than a casualty of a game she never even knew we were playing. The empire that my father had worked so hard to build, the one he thought would pass down to his perfect daughter, was now nothing more than a hollow shell. I had dismantled it piece by piece, and there was nothing left for them to hold on to. They had lost everything, and I had everything. As the silence stretched on, I turned away from her, my eyes resting on the window that overlooked the city. I couldn't feel anything for her anymore. There was no joy, no satisfaction in seeing her broken. There was only the cold, unyielding truth I had taken everything, and there was no going back. As I stand here, looking out at the city I now own, I can't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about the applause, fangi, or the recognition. It wasn't about being the one with the loudest voice in the room. It was about control. True control, the kind that's never flaunted, never shouted from the rooftops. It's the kind that's built in silence, in the shadows, where no one can see the pieces falling into place until it's too late. The Vale family legacy, the empire my father spent his life building, it's mine now. And not in the way they thought, not in the way they ever imagined. They thought it was about who had the most charm, who had the perfect smile, who could win the room with ease. But that was never the game I was playing. I never needed to play it. I built something real, something lasting. The pieces they celebrated, the properties, the estate, the name, it's all mine now. And all of it was acquired without a single word of confrontation, no angry outbursts, no public battles, just patience, precision, and a quiet determination. My father, my sister, they never saw it coming, and they never will. In the end, I didn't just take the family business, I took the power, and now I stand as the true architect of the family empire, the one who shaped it, who molded it, who saw what no one else could see, and no one will ever be able to take that from me. But you know, even as I stand here, watching everything unfold around me, I can't help but think this is only the beginning. The empire I've inherited, the one I've now remade, it's just a foundation. What I do with it from here is entirely up to me. If you've enjoyed this journey, this look behind the curtain, please consider giving this story a like. And if you want to see what happens next, if you want to follow the evolution of this empire, don't forget to subscribe. Your support makes all of this possible, and I'd love for you to be part of the journey as it unfolds. Until next time.